Welcome to Breaking Stereotypes with Todd and Tootsie. Today we're joined by Waffles. That's the name of the man and the name of his YouTube channel, which currently has over 34,000 subscribers. Waffles' videos focus on topics within the Blackpill ideology. And the purpose of today's interview is to get to know Waffles the man, to really try to understand his audience and what they're going through, and to try to find solutions to some of the problems that are being exposed through Waffles' videos. So with that, welcome Waffles. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here. So just like to give a very quick introduction for the audience if they've never heard of my channel before or anything like that. My channel mainly deals with issues in terms of the male dating space, and the overall points that I make in my video is usually linking back to these three main pillars, in terms of men's dating issues. Number one is that women will only want to date up in terms of their mate choices. So they will want to date a man who's higher overall value than them. The second point is the importance of looks. So when I'm talking about women want to date up, it means that they want to date somebody who is of equal attractiveness or greater attractiveness in terms of physicality than themselves. And the third point, the third pillar, is that guys are very restricted in terms of being able to change their looks. So it is mostly fixed. So obviously for a guy's appearance, that you're going to have for all things to do with his appearance, you're going to be able to divide each thing into two different categories: things that he can change and things that he can't change. So things such as working on his physical fitness, such as going to the gym, exercising, his diet intake and things like that. They're all going to improve his appearance by lowering his body fat percentage and things like that. And same goes for things such as the clothes that you wear, your styling, if you have a beard, or how you groom yourself, your hair, things like that. And then on the opposite side, so that's the first group, the things that you can change to do with your looks. And the thing that the Blackpill emphasizes more, things that has greater importance, is things that you can't change, such as your facial structure, your height, your frame. These are all things that you can't change, or you are very, very limited in terms of changing easily, such as there are a few extreme techniques out there, such as mewing, which is involves facial exercises to try to modify your facial structure, but there isn't a huge amount of research done into that field. And then obviously you've got things such as surgery, which a lot of people would consider extreme, but to pretty much summarize, they're the three main points that the Blackpill and my channel is bring to the table. One, women will only want to date up. Two, the importance of looks. And three, that guys' looks is very fixed in place for the most part.
All right. Well, you definitely gave us a mouthful there, and there's just a lot to that ideology, and we'll definitely be digging into a lot of those points over the course of the interview. But I guess my first question about that would be isn't that the same for everyone? Why is it specifically women versus just kind of human nature to want to date up and, date more attractive people? Isn't that something that men, women, gay, straight, everyone kind of aspires to?
And to follow up with that, is, in your viewpoint, there's something that's more of a issue that's been within recent time period, or is this something that you feel like has existed for a long period of time?
Okay, so there was a few things to note there. I'll start with your point, Tootsie. So I'm often asked this, people often say, isn't it kind of obvious, obviously men care about looks and women do too. There's nothing new that you're bringing to the table here. But I think that the fundamental difference between, the male side of caring about looks and the women's side of caring about looks is that the general consensus is that, most people in the, mainstream, well, just everywhere in general, wherever you go, men have no issue with, accepting the fact that they care about looks. It's widely regarded. Women know that men care about looks. That's the main thing in terms of their priority list, that men, mostly care about looks, and men have no issue accepting that or saying that. Like if you watch clips, like I've shown some clips in my videos of when people do like street interviews, and the vast majority of the men, like they flat out just say, oh yeah, of course I care about looks, it's something that I value a lot. Meanwhile, when they do the exact same thing for women, it's the complete polar opposite. Like this is like the main difference that I'm trying to highlight, that when women are talking about the importance of looks in terms of looking for male partners, it's almost completely swept under the rug. Like that, in fact, I would even go as far to say that would be the most like controversial thing that they could not say in terms of, you know, what they value when looking for a guy. Like, you know, I think you can always put on like a spectrum of how like politically correct a certain trait to look for in a partner is. And on the like higher positive side, you've got things, you know, intelligence, personality, you know, character, humor, you know, all things that, you know, are quite, you know, it will make a person look noble if they stated that those things were their preference. Meanwhile, like, you know, in the mid-range, I would say, you know, looking for something like status or even money, you know, that's getting a little bit more into the like shallow territory. And then all the way on the other side is like looks. And I think that's the one that's most underrepresented in terms of when women say their opinions on how they feel about these different traits that they look for in a partner. So that was the, you know, point to cover your point about, you know, the difference between men and women's opinions on looks. And to go to yours, Todd, you mentioned, do you think that it's changed recently in the last, I'm guessing you mean in the last, you know, 100 to 200 years or even 50 years? I think that was the question that you're asking.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, probably more like 20 or 30 years in that time period, you know, kind of since the creation of online dating, for example.
Yeah, well, if I'm honest, like, you know, people often go back to like 30 years. They think that that's when like the inception of this whole, you know, looks obsession started. But I think it even goes back further than that. Because if you take like 100 years ago or any time before that, I think in a lot of the times, unless a woman was, you know, born into wealth or she came from a wealthy background, she was almost forced to marry a guy who had a stable job, who worked long hours and brought a lot of financial stability to the table. Because otherwise, you know, unfortunately, put simply, if a woman has a child with a man who can't provide, then, you know, her children's chances of survival are like greatly diminished because there's nobody there to actually bring resources to the table. And we're also talking about, this was a time when women were often seen as not able to have jobs. Like a lot of women weren't allowed to, you know, be in the workplace. And that's only changed, you know, in the last century or so. And there was another point I was going to say. So, yeah, so that's kind of changed in the last, you know, best part of the last 100 years. But now things recently, even more recently, if you look for the last 30 years, that effect has been even more exacerbated. So because of the like introduction of online dating, that has put an even greater emphasis on looks, because obviously, you know, these things are all online nowadays. And if you're judging a man's value based on his profile on an online dating app, the main thing that you're going to see there is his photos first. You're going to look at his facial structure. You'll probably see how tall he is if he's got friends in the photo, like, you know, how he lines up in terms of height compared to them. So I think that's even exacerbating how important looks are even more. And there's a chart that's been floating around for the last few years showing the mediums that people, modern couples, how their relationships form. And it's a really striking graph because it shows about 30 to 40 years ago, the number one ways that people met to have a relationship would have been, you know, the usual work, college or school or church or something like that. But now those are all massively on the decline. And the thing that's really shot up in the last 10, 15 years is online dating. Like I believe, I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think that the numbers is over 50% now. So over half the couples meeting nowadays are through online dating. And that's just something that's not been seen before, you know, as of before the last 15 years.
Okay. And so you're saying that, essentially when women were in the workforce, that's probably when it was kind of maybe stage one, where women, kind of were equal then, or much more than they were. And so then looks kind of followed as being equal as well. And then it's even been ramped up more that the online dating is such a phenomenon, then it ends up being something where it's, from your point of view, it's blatantly obvious what's going on, correct?
Yeah. If I was going to explain it like in one way, like you asked, has this phenomenon like always been there? Like I think the best way to put it is that it's always been there, but up until recently, women couldn't really do much in terms of enacting on this whole concept, because even if a woman, really did care about looks and, she really wanted to, get in a relationship with a guy who was the best looking person, she couldn't really afford to do it before like 50 years ago, just because she needed to prioritize other factors such as money in order to, prioritize her children that will eventually be born. And there's also another whole area involved as well, that the number of options a woman has gone up, which will increase like her, choice in terms of how the best looking person that she can pick out of a certain number of guys. Because obviously, nowadays in the modern world, there's, you've got social media, so there's a much easier way for people to connect with people that they would never have seen before. So you have all of these interactions that are now taking place that, as of the last 20, 30 years would have never happened in the first place. People's social circles were much smaller. 100 years ago, they would only know a handful of people, within their work or, their school or something like that. And there wasn't the means for transport for people to get around either. And I remember seeing some statistic, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was that the majority of people 100 years ago wouldn't have ever left like anywhere outside of a 50-mile radius of where they were born, up until like the day they die. And that's just, that if that would be like less than 5%, I'd imagine nowadays, because, people are always, moving town, cities, either permanently or even temporarily, like just for a vacation or something like that. So it just puts a little bit into perspective, how the dating market is changing, or how the changes that are happening in the real world are affecting the dating market now.
Right.
Okay.
And I just want to clarify. So the majority of, the black pill ideology in your videos, is it really about just getting in the door, sort of getting that past that first block of, meeting someone? And because the first opportunity to get in the door online is with your picture, that's why it's so skewed towards taller, better looking people?
Yeah, so this is like an issue that a lot of people bring up when it comes to the black pill. They say that there's a massive focus on looks, that, you care way too much about it, but there isn't really much, content that you provide in terms of what you should do after, like, you've built that initial attraction. Like, as you said, looks only get you in the door, but then what happens after that? And there's this phrase that I've used a couple of times in my previous videos that dating nowadays for men, it's like a job interview, and your looks is your resume or CV. And then your personality, your character, all the other things that you have going for you is like the interview. But I feel that nowadays, most men are struggling way more in the first department, which is getting their actual foot in the door. Like, there's so many guys out there that like don't get any matches on online dating apps, and you think that's just a massive like avenue for, especially nowadays, and that guys would need to be able to date women, but that door's just completely slammed shut for them. They're ruled out altogether. So even if a guy does have a great personality, he brings a lot to the table, he's kind-hearted, he's loyal, he has all of these other good traits, he's just not going to get noticed because he's never actually got his foot on the door in the first place. But I do fundamentally agree with the idea that as a man you will need to have both things. So you will need to obviously have the looks part to get in the door, and then you also need to have the secondary characteristics. You can't just rely on one unless we're talking short-term casual dating and hookups, things like that, one-night stands.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So I can relate to this myself, just feeling like my looks are not my strong suit, and my ability to get a date, if it's just online, I'm not going to have a lot of success, and I haven't had a lot of success on dating apps. I know that my strengths kind of work to my advantage in person, or as they say, in warm climates. And so I guess that's kind of my next question, which I know ironically is understood as red pill ideology, I guess, but the idea that you can make more opportunities for yourself if you're putting yourself in an in-person environment where you have the opportunity to show off some of those things that you stated, your personality, your intelligence, your kindness, things like that. So
you're referring to game.
Yeah, well, but I think game is such a bad...
It's a bad word.
It's a bad word.
But it's what you're saying, though, right? Is that something that she's describing?
Yeah, I'd say like that is, kind of all bundled into one package. Like there is a little bit of crossover between personality and game, but it's all like fairly similar. But I think there's more of a negative stigma when people talk about game because they think it's some, they think it's too strategic, overthinking things, or too logical, or some people even go as far as calling it out for being manipulative.
Right. And that's kind of my feeling is game sounds like you're kind of douchey, to be honest. Like you're doing pickup lines or you're trying to be a pickup artist, whereas I'm kind of more referring to like if you have a hobby that you're really into, you might meet someone with that common interest and build rapport through that. Or if you have a sense of humor, or if you have a talkative personality, just putting yourself in environments that work more to your advantage versus that sort of manipulative, like, I'm going to put the moves on kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So pretty much like all of the things that I've said so far, a lot of people think, oh, it sounds quite negative. Is there anything that you can actually take away from learning this stuff? But what you said pretty much, it does kind of show that, having a understanding of the things I talk about in my content will open doors in terms of how you should strategically like go about like trying to optimize your dating life, given your best skill set. You want to be putting your best foot forward. And that doesn't just apply to dating. That's pretty like fundamental for any aspect of life. So, for yourself, such as you just said that your strongest factors are your personality and your kindness and things like that. So you're going to be better suited to warm environments. And I think a lot of guys can, kind of apply that kind of thinking to themselves as well. And I've actually got a video coming up in the future where I'm going to outline, I think 7 or 8 ways how, as a guy, you can reduce the importance of looks, because that's obviously what you want to do, like as much as possible. And there's all sorts of reasons that I've given in this video, but one of them is exactly what you've just mentioned, which is changing the environment where you're trying to date, so you can, you're more inclined to maybe go to a warm environment, such as a club that you go to regularly. If you have a sport that you play, or if you're a really sociable person, maybe you're better off going to like a bar or a club or something like that, where you can actually talk to people a lot more. And it works both ways, because I have a friend who isn't socially like the best. He's a little bit timid. He's quite shy. He doesn't like starting conversations with new people. And well, I'm trying to say it as kind as possible here, but to put it bluntly, like he's not the most interesting person to talk to. And for him, like, he was a good looking guy. So my advice to him, I said, go on online dating. That's your best chance, because that's where, you can put your strength, which for this in person was his look. So we can, excel in that environment. And obviously you're only worried about texting, which in all honesty isn't that difficult. And I've shown countless examples in my videos that even if you have really bad texting, like game, as you would put it, you can still like be able to like land dates if the woman is interested enough. Like, it's honestly, some of the examples I've shown in my videos, like they look staged or faked, but just because of how comical some of them can be. Like, some women, they will just give let off after let off for a guy if they find him attractive enough, even if his social skills in this environment are just flat out awful.
Sure. Well, it's the same thing. I think there's been some studies where women would really attractive women would make online profiles that were just hideous as far as their content. Like, I think it was on OkCupid, or I think that was the website. And, you know, they would say like all kinds of horrible things in the text of their profile, but they had these beautiful pictures, and they would, you know, still get tons of matches, even though they said, you know, I like to kill cats on my free time and things like that, just to do a social experiment. And the women, no matter what they said, didn't make a difference. So you're saying that, you know, it's going to be the same for the Chad, which for our audience members don't know, that's kind of maybe the top 15, 20% of guys who are an attractiveness level. So it's so you're essentially saying it's working both ways at this time period, the same.
Yeah, like top 15, 20% guys would, you know, get away with a lot more, especially in an online environment. I would say it's a bit more like top 10 to 15%.
Okay.
But it's, you know, same alike anyway. But just to give a few like personal anecdotes, like I found that for online dating, it's the bar of like what you can and can't say as an average or below average looking guy is very, very sensitive. And some jokes that like I've said in real life, and because I'm able to tone it in the right way, and you know, it's quite obvious that I'm joking or something like that, you know, I get a good laugh from it. Like the woman responds in a positive way, and it's, you know, overall like it leads to a positive, like net positive during the interaction. Meanwhile, if I said the exact same joke over text, because there's no tone that I can use or anything like that, I found that when an average or below average looking guy says something that's intended to be a joke, the women will actually take it seriously and think, whoa, that's you know, breaking social norms. Like, how dare you say that? Meanwhile, like the example that you just provided, that guy who had in his Tinder bio that he likes to you know, do something with cats.
No, that was actually a very attractive woman, and she was still getting matches, even though she was doing it. Yes. So I was asking if you're stating that it's kind of the same way with the Chads that it would be with the attractive woman, that they can basically say anything and it's not really going to make a difference. They're still going to get dates and matches and so on and so forth.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't hear you said that was from a woman's profile, but
yes.
I think the point, you know, does carry forward anyway, that if you're a guy and you have something such as that in your profile, that, you know, you are like harmful towards cats, then people often see that as just a joke. They'll think like, oh, he's just, you know, having a laugh. Like they wouldn't even, if the guy is attractive, of course, they'll think that, you know, like he's just putting that, you know, just to, you know, be a joke. Like it's just a, you know, that's the whole idea.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'd love to take a step back and just learn a little bit about you and how you kind of arrived at this. You know, I'm guessing that, you know, you at some point it came to this because of your own personal experience. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that was like partially, you know, one of the reasons that I've, you know, like went down this path and created this channel and everything like that. It's probably like a 50-50 split in terms of the content I was watching and my own experiences too. Or actually, rather, it would be mostly the content that I watched first, and then I was able to, you know, work backwards, think about my experiences and think, yeah, that is accurate. The guy, what he's saying in this video, it does make sense. So then I was able to, you know, latch on to that way of thinking. But initially, like when I first started like out in the dating market, you know, as most guys do, like I think 90% of guys will be able to relate to this. The first port of call that they go to when they think about how to approach dating will be what's referred to as the blue pill, like a blue pill mindset, which is, you know, what your mother may have told you when you was younger, to be the nice guy, to, you know, just always be there, be available, make sure that you're kind to her and things like that. And I realized pretty quickly that wasn't really realistic. And I'm not saying that these aren't good things to have. Like, I don't think that, you know, like I'm not saying that the opposite of kind is to be nasty to women instead. But, you know, I just don't think that they build attraction. They're just non-factors, to put it like in a way that I think the audience will be able to understand. They don't build attraction directly. Like, you can be nice to a girl, but it's not going to make her attracted to you, especially not physically, like maybe emotionally, but definitely not physically. Like, it's not going to, you know, create that primal, like, you know, sexual desire that so many guys aren't able to escalate with women. So after I, you know, rejected that way of thinking, I started following a lot more of what would be referred to as the red pill sort of content. So if you go online and you look up dating advice into YouTube or into Google, chances are, like, over, you know, like 95% of the videos that you see will be promoting like red pill ideas. Like, you're going to see the dating coaches to pick up artists, their sort of content being put forward first. And that's when I started thinking, oh, so this is what I need to do. So it's about learning game, you know, having this kind of approach to dating, which is, you know, trying to be an alpha male, trying to be high value and things like that. But then, and the way that a lot of these content creators laid it out was that I would approach your interaction, and I should be able to predict what the outcome of that interaction would be based on how, you know, how I perform during it. If my game was on point, if I was able to consistently, you know, make her laugh and invested into the conversation. Like, the pickup artists put it in a way that they would make it seem predictable. However, that was almost like the complete opposite again of what I was experiencing in real life. And just a couple of examples, like off the top of my head, of real experiences. Like, a three-way interaction, me, another guy, and a girl. And obviously the girl was quite attractive. You know, most guys would want to date her, and the guy in this situation probably did as well. Well, I know he did based on the outcome. And then, like, during the interaction, like, I was keeping, you know, I learned the red pill stuff. So I thought I had a good idea what game was, and I'll keep like a mental tally in my mind of, you know, who was like doing better at that point, because I knew that I was in like direct competition with him, and I was like just trying to analyze the situation like as best as I could. I was like, okay, so I responded well to this part of the conversation. I made her laugh here, and here. I did well here. I did exactly what the pickup artist said to do if you ever encountered this situation. So I was, you know, pretty much running things exactly how the dating coaches outlined that things should run. Like, and I knew, like, this isn't just me like deluding myself, thinking, you know, like trying to come off in an arrogant way, like thinking I know it all. But like, the interaction itself showed that I was doing well, because, you know, you're able to quite obviously read how, you know, people, in this case, the girl, is responding to like the things that you're saying and the way that you're saying it. Meanwhile, the other guy, on the other person, he was like, his interaction with the girl, and just as a whole, it was just almost a train wreck. Like, I could just count off, like, it was just an endless like number of events where I was just thinking back to the videos that I'd watched, and I was thinking, oh, so he's done this wrong. He was cringy when he said this. He failed this part. He made himself look bad here. And so by the end of like the interaction, to get to the point, I was thinking, right, so clearly I've outperformed this other man in this situation. So the girl would find me more attractive. She would want to choose me over him. But unbelievably, that's the complete opposite of what happened. She ended up choosing him anyway. It's almost as if, like, I'm not sure if you guys watch boxing, but quite a lot of people who are watching this podcast will. Mm-hmm. Like, after 12 rounds, if no winner is decided through, you know, obviously knocking the other person out, it goes to the judges. And I remember there was this fight a couple years ago between this boxer called Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. And by the end of the 12th round, it was almost as if every person watching from home, everyone watching from the stadium, and all of the teams even, they knew like what the outcome should have been, that Tyson Fury was on to win the fight. He had just outperformed the other guy much better. But then miraculously, when it was overturned to the judges, it turned out as a draw. And people were just, there was just so much confusion like within everyone, and like almost immediately, if you went online, people were just calling it an outrage. They was thinking, how is this possible? This is, like disgraceful. There's no way that this was a draw. Clearly, one person outperformed the other. And I think that example relates to what I was experiencing when I was following like the red pill stuff, that even if I performed well in my eyes, and the dating coaches, I was following the dating coaches' advice, I still was getting outbeaten by other guys who in my eyes, I thought that I was outperforming. And finally, I'm getting like close to the end of the story.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Good story.
So then it was only about a year and a half ago, I stumbled across like this new set of ideas I'd never heard of before, called the Blackpill. I saw this content creator called Face and LMS. I'm sure some of the people who are watching this would have heard of him. And he proposed that it's mainly looks in terms of your face and your height that's, the main reasons why women choose the guys that they do. And when I watched a bit more of his videos, and he started explaining his experiences and things like that, that kind of it was just almost an eye opener. Like it was able to explain so many experiences, and in fact, every experience that I just listed just before then, it was able to explain why I wasn't able to get any dating success on those occasions. It just was a complete eye opener. Like, and that's pretty much how I ended up, just discovering this and, changing the set of beliefs that I hold. And I ended up starting my channel about 6 months after that.
Okay. And so for the people watching from our end, can you tell us a little bit about your own personal backstory? So for the one thing is that, you're extremely young, and so you're 20 years old, correct?
Yeah, 20 years old.
Yes, and so and you have this channel which is pretty amazing as far as the content, and so I'm wondering, can you kind of talk us through that process as far as, okay, you decided that you were going to make a channel at some point because this is something that's really resonated with you. What were the next steps then, for you personally, as far as, kind of the development of the channel?
In terms of the channel?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So when I first, if I'm honest, like when I first started my channel, like I didn't expect it to be some like big thing that, like I didn't see that it was going to take me anywhere. I was just, I'm just going to chuck out a few videos because like I was bored, like, and I'd finished school and I'd taken a gap year because of the coronavirus outbreak, and I didn't want to go to college that year. So I took a year out and I was unemployed, well, technically unemployed at that time. So I had a lot of free time on my hands, and I just started making videos. And the first couple of weeks, like I didn't expect it to go anywhere. I was only getting, 10, 20, 30, 40 views. And then that turned into 100 views and a couple hundred views. And then I started taking it a lot more seriously. And I'm actually, for the last few months, I've actually been doing it full time. So I've been focusing just on my channel. I've been able to grow it to a point where it's able to like cover my like financial needs as well. So I don't have to have a real job instead.
But, and I mean, you say that you kind of did it out of boredom and a little, just give it a shot and this and that. But I'm assuming there must be a level, like Todd said, you resonated with it. Did you feel like this urge that I want to share this message or spread this message because of the way it connected with you and seemed to have helped you understand your own situation?
I guess that's kind of grown over time, because if you ask me like within the first month of me starting my channel, like if you ask me like how much do you value your channel, it probably wouldn't even make like the top 5 in terms of my life priorities at that point. But now, you know, it's easily got to be top 3. So I think that desire to you know, spread this message and continue producing like higher quality videos has like grown a lot more over time as I've built a bigger audience and I started taking it a lot more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And is this something that do you share this in your personal life with people? Do you talk about this all the time? I mean, are you telling your friends and, you know, is this constantly the topic of discussion, or is this something you really just channel and focus into your YouTube videos and then kind of leave it there and go about your life?
Yeah, I think to an extent, you know, a lot of people talk about like they don't want to talk about work because
right.
like, especially like I know a lot of families, they have this idea that, you know, when the wife or the husband comes back from work, they don't want to talk about their work because the idea is that they get home from work so then they can relax rather than just talking about all the things that they did at work. So there is an element of that, but like for me, like it is a topic that I enjoy talking about. So I do, you know, talk to other people about, you know, just these sort of ideas in general, like to try and get their opinions on it. And sometimes it can actually lead to a positive, because if somebody provides an idea or an anecdote or something like that relates to it, I can end up using that in my content as well. So there's that too. But I do like mix it up. It's not, you know, I don't think I'll ever get to the point where this is the only thing that I'll ever talk about in real life. You know, I don't want to become obsessed like that crazy. But yeah, it's always going to be, you know, like it's always going to be a topic that I find interesting. Like I will bring it up from time to time, but you know, to repeat, it's never going to get to the point where I'm like, it's the only thing that I talk about.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you just, when you do talk about it, do you share it with both genders? Do you talk about females with it as well? And what has been their response? And I'm sure it might be all over the board, but I'm just interested in your experiences.
Yeah, of course. In fact, I'd even go as far to say that I think I benefit more from hearing a woman's perspective on like when I discuss these ideas with them, because you know they're the ones who men are actually trying to date, so they actually provide like quite a lot of insight. And you know, I won't like ever go into too much depth like with them. Like I don't want it to be a whole like full-blown argument or something that leads to that. So I just say, you know, like I just bring up like a few examples, be like, oh, is there like an unattractive guy who like you keep, you know, in your friend circle, but you would never date, but do you think that he secretly likes you? And what would you do if he ever like made a move towards you or confessed his feelings? Like I just ask questions like that, just to see what their responses are. And like in the vast majority of the cases, when they do bring up these guys, or like if I ask to see a photo, it will be someone who isn't conventionally attractive, or the woman is noticeably more attractive than the man. And she will subconsciously know that she is you know, in a higher league than the guy. However, it's interesting because a lot of the time the woman wouldn't actually say that. Like she would use something else. She would say something such as, "Oh, the guy's just not my type," or you know, just almost like a cover up. Like we just don't have that chemistry. Like we don't have that click or that vibe. It would be like a different sort of excuse, rather than, you know, whether it's down to wanting to appear noble and virtuous, or whether it's just ignorance that she's not actually aware of the things she finds attractive. Like it could be either of those reasons, but that's what I've generally found to be the result when I've had these like, you know, few conversations with women.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to what you were stating earlier, that like men and women might do the same thing, as far as say, like, I don't want to date this person because they're unattractive, say that to themselves. But maybe women are more socialized to be polite, not to, you know, be so blunt and state the obvious about it. And so they're kind of trying to polish it a little bit and say those kind of things that you just stated.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I actually have a couple of experiences that almost contradict what I've just said. But the only difference like that caused this, I believe, would be the person that the woman is talking to. I found that when women talk to guys, they will, you know, put on the front of being virtuous and not like having these shallow opinions. But I found when I've been like a third party who's not actually involved in the conversation, but I can overhear a woman's conversation. So when I was in school, like I was one of the first people in my age group to own a car, and like I'd often do, like, you know, when people were coming back from like parties or something like that, then I would pick up people and take them home. And sometimes like I would have a car like with like 3 or 4 girls in at the same time, and they would all, you know, be quite drunk as well, and you know, like they'd be quite loud, and they'd start talking about the guys that they saw at the party. And this is when I found like the real truths can stumble out, and they would like just flat out say, "Oh, can you believe that guy who hit on me? Like he thought he had a chance. Like, no way. Did you see how short he was? Like it was pathetic. It was laughable." So those are some quite memorable experiences for me, where like that's almost like as authentic as it gets. Like obviously alcohol in itself is going to make people more open and upfront, but then I also think there is an element of the like target audience, that a woman will be a lot more more likely to put on a front in front of guys, and potentially, you know, like anyone who's in a position of authority, rather than when they're like just with their very close girlfriends, other girlfriends that, you know, that they have a deeper connection with.
Sure. Well, there's also the potential danger, even if it's minimal, as far as, you know, telling a man that he's not attractive enough, right? You know, from a woman's point of view, that she may, you know, be concerned that he might get angry or something like that. And, you know, versus, you know, and I think, I don't know how many guys, you know, maybe with their body language they say it, but would also, you know, say, you know, I'm not interested in you because of the way that you look. I think, you know, I think guys, generally speaking, will probably give, you know, be nice about it as well. Well, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the point you just raised is quite interesting. I've actually heard a few people talk about that in the past, that maybe it stems from like an evolutionary like reason, or, you know, just even putting that aside, you know, like a guy could, you know, just get a lot more angry, like he's going to have a lot more of an emotional reaction, rather than if she just lays it down gently to the guy and says something along the lines of, "Oh, you know, I'm just not ready for you right now. Like, I just need a little more bit time to think." And meanwhile, if a woman does say that, it's almost like a double-edged sword. Like she's killing 2 birds with 1 stone here, because number one, she's been able to, you know, save herself from a potentially damaging interaction with a guy. And she's also, by saying, you know, "I'm just not ready for you now," she's also been able to keep this guy in the background who, you know, he might delude himself into thinking, right, if she said that she's just not ready, then I've just got to stick around a little bit longer. For the next 6 months, I'm going to try working on myself. I'm going to try being like extra nice to her. I'm going to potentially like buy her gifts, which, you know, linking back to the like evolutionary points that I talked about, you know, a guy, you know, like what could he bring to the table in those sort of times? He would have, you know, like put a bigger shift in terms of being able to hunt, provide food. Like he might just give free food for the woman, just because he's clinging on to that hope of one day the woman will eventually change her mind and you know, be there to date him.
Mm-hmm. That's called being in the friend zone, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I could have just said that.
Well, I mean, a lot of people, you know, may not be aware of that term. Mm-hmm. But, you know, essentially it's kind of like you said, the orbiters are people that the woman still keeps in her life, you know, for validation and emotional support, things of that nature, but really has no interest or in ever, you know, kind of going there, except for, you know, maybe years down the line if she has no other options.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a good point that you just said at the end there, that women are a lot more strict, like by nature, in terms of their biological clock. So they have a very limited time frame of about, you know, 15 to 20 years where they're able to produce children, well, at least healthy children. So if that time runs out, or it's close to be running out, they better, you know, think of up some solutions like rather quickly. And, you know, the solution is fairly obvious. That she can just call up the guy, talk to the guy who she was, keeping in orbit for all that time, and then just, date him like last minute. Meanwhile, men don't really have to ever resort to that option because men are able, or they might not have to for as much of a long time because they are able to produce offspring for their whole life. But that's the opposite for women, of course.
Sure.
That's just like reminded me of something else, because a lot of guys on my channel, this is probably one of the biggest criticisms they face. I don't like participate in this myself, but I know a lot of guys in my channel do kind of have this mindset. They get upset or bitter like towards women, like they're angry with them. They're like, oh, how dare they like do this and things like that. But if I'm honest, when you think about it, like logically, the behavior that a lot of women participate in now and even throughout history, it only makes perfect sense for them optimizing their like dating strategy. Like everything that they do is, it makes sense for them to be able to produce and raise the healthiest offspring with the best chance of survival. Like, to put simply, if you're a woman in today's dating market, why wouldn't you use online dating and try to get the best guy? Why wouldn't you friend zone all of the other guys who you don't think are as attractive? So then at least if you miss your chance with the best guy, you can just call up one of them in 10 years time and you still have a chance to produce offspring. So when you think about it this way, like, it does make sense why women do this behavior, even if, a lot of guys might think that it's immoral on the outside.
You've talked about some of the different groups, and I'm curious to know what you think about the breakdowns of each. And I'm just going to name the three groups that you always reference. The sub 5 would be sort of the what you're discussing, where there's an issue with looks or height or visual presentation. Normie, which would be kind of like your average, like you're not the hottest guy, you're not the ugliest guy. And then Chad, which would be the top tier. And this is all as far as looks go, right?
Yeah, they're spot on. Sub 5, normies, and Chads. And then there are like some sort of subcategories within that. Like people talk about like a low tier normie or a high tier normie or a Chad light, things like that. So there's these subcategories, but to put it simply, like there is 3 just main tiers, which is just the sub 5, the normie, and the Chad. And you can kind of break down the different interactions they would expect to have given their tier in real life, like with women or just in life in general, like what sort of treatment they would expect to get. It is like fairly predictable, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And would you say the breakdown, it's kind of like a bell curve where, there's a smaller percentage?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I actually made a video on this. Like, it's becoming one of my popular videos. Like, I only made it about a month ago, but it's already like one of my most viewed. So obviously, like, I'm not sure if anyone watching this will know, but I run a business on the side where guys send me their photos and then I tell them how attracted they are on a scale of 1 to 10. And a couple months ago, I hit over 1,000 orders for that particular service, and I like collected all of that data. I put it into one big spreadsheet and like did my best to like analyze it and like draw a graph about how many guys received each rating. And as you say, like it was very much a bell curve sort of shape. So there was very few guys at either the very least like lowest levels of attractiveness and the highest levels of attractiveness, but the majority of guys did fall into that normies tier sort of grouping where they're neither, extremely attractive or unattractive.
Mm-hmm. And that's also where you feel like the most amount of personal change can come from, correct? As far as gym, kind of the red pill ideology as far as, game and things of that nature. So that if you're kind of in that normie range, then those tools can be effective for you or help your chances.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, if you're, like a guy who's, like mid-tier average, But if you improve on your social skills, if you like build up a gym body, then that can, like that's going to give you an edge over all of the other regular, like average guys. But if you're, in the top tier, you're already like at the top. So, and women are going to have pre-selected you anyway. So it's not going to really help, obviously will help, but it's not going to make a noticeable difference, because if you're already at the top, there's not really much else you can do in terms of, building, beating like all of the other guys, because you already like have made it, I would say. So like if you're a guy and you're already getting hundreds of matches on Tinder, women are already going to be pre-selecting you. Your looks like is your main focus. And even if you don't have particularly good social skills, like you're going to get women that let it slide. That they're still going to be willing to make an effort with you. But for a normie guy, if he's kind of on the fence, if a woman's on the fence about, whether she's prospecting him as a potential dating option or not, I've sometimes seen that if he brings other stuff to the table, such as him being high status or him having exceptionally good social skills, then that can almost put him over the edge. Like they're just extra little points that can boost him up into be seen as date worthy. And just to finish off, obviously, those little bonuses aren't going to help a guy who's at the bottom of the attractiveness level, because like he's a mile off of where he needs to be. And these, crumbs that he's picking up, like these tiny little points, like they're still going to put him vastly out of reach in terms of being able to build attraction with women.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of leads us to our podcast, which is it's about breaking stigma. And so one of the huge stigmas out there is that sub-5 category. And also, according to what your thoughts are about this, a lot of, kind of maybe low-tier normies or normies in general, kind of fall into that category of involuntary celibate. And so a lot of men in today's dating culture are eliminated, are left out. And that would take a huge toll on a man's mental health, potentially physical health, and so on and so forth. And I think that the mainstream media has portrayed these group of guys in a very negative stereotype, when the reality is that these are just guys who are in a lot of pain. Would you concur with that?
Yeah, so I think the point that you're trying to get to, like you mentioned, the media's like sort of interpretation of like, the community that a lot of the guys who follow my channel like kind of identify as, and that is like the term incels. In my opinion, like I'm pretty sure I've got a very sort of clean cut response like to this, sort of question, which is that when it comes to incels, I think there's two definitions that are being tossed around right now. So the first one is like the media's definition. Like the media portrays, like whenever I've seen it on like mainstream TV or YouTube or anything like that from any like large companies, they will always just portray it as like these incels are like women hating, they're misogynistic, they're violent, they're aggressive, they're like some of them are even, would go as far to cause physical violence to members of the public, innocent members of the public,
or
so
themselves.
Got, like, that sort of
throw in there.
Yeah, sorry.
Or themselves, I would just add in.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So like they see him as like radicalists, but in my opinion, that's like we're not even talking 1% here. Like this, I'm not going to deny you do get, a handful of guys who, are this way inclined. Maybe there's some mental health issues there as well, who do sort of take things down the wrong path. But I wholly disagree with that sort of way of thinking. And I did raise earlier, like during this podcast, that men who think like that, like they're a bit like insane almost, because as I said earlier, that you can't really complain about women, their behavior in the dating market, because as I said, like it makes perfect logical sense, like what they're doing. So it would be like me figuring out a good strategy in like a game of chess and employing that, and then the opponent getting bitter about me using that strategy, when in all honesty it just makes sense for me to do it because it benefits me. Anyway, so that's like the first definition of like the media definition of like the term incel. And I think what's a more accurate definition is like exactly what the word means anyway, which is involuntary celibate. So it means somebody who isn't able to find a partner or build, get attraction from a woman because of circumstances out of his control. There's nothing he can do about it. That's where the term involuntary like comes from. And that could be like for any reasons, but the main focus that's kind of portrayed on my channel and other people's channels is, obviously to do with looks, because that is something that most people are very limited in changing, especially if they have extreme circumstances, such as being like really short in height, balding from a very young age, which I found to be like devastating for some guys' dating life, but not so much if a guy is like in his 30s or 40s, because, it's kind of expected at that point, or just having like an unattractive face and things like that. But there's also other factors such as like mental health. If a guy has like really like naturally low self-esteem, then or he's like got depression or something like that, like clinically diagnosed depression, something like that, then that can obviously have a massive impact on his dating life too. And these are all factors that are going to be like mostly outside of their control. There's not really much people can do to resolve these things, and that's what obviously leads to the term involuntary celibate.
So one of the things I want to ask is what you were talking about before when you were talking about the sub 5. You were kind of saying there's not anything they can do. Normies, they're not so far off. If they make one or two tweaks, physical to their body, get a haircut, those kind of things, they have a chance. But you were kind of saying that sub 5, there's not anything they can do. That sounds really bleak to me. And so I imagine if you find yourself in that bucket, if you identify in that group, that would be a very bleak outlook to have, that it's hopeless. I can't do anything to change. I don't personally believe that. I have to believe that there are still things people can do to improve their chances, to improve their circumstances. But like I said, it may not be on the apps. It may not be going looks-based. Is kind of what we were talking about before, putting yourself in positions to succeed, working on certain aspects of yourself that can, learn a language, that's going to open up whole new doors, open up your social circle, things like that. I mean, do you really believe there's nothing anyone can do in the sub 5, or that it's more nuanced than that?
If I'm honest, I think you've actually raised a fairly convincing point. Like, if I did say the words, there's nothing a sub 5 can do, then that is a bit too much of an ultimatum, because and you kind of touched upon it when you said about learning different languages, that there's this whole sort of like advice that some people give. I've mentioned it a couple of times in my channel as well, that if you're a sub 5 guy, learning a new language and going to another country can be, that can put you in a position where you're now like an average higher value than a lot of the other guys. So just to give some simple statistics, the average height in the UK is 5'10", in America it's 5'10", in some countries such as the Netherlands it's 6 foot. I think Germany it's either 5'11" or 6 foot, one of the two. And if you take a guy who's say 5'7", he's like massively he's got a huge weight on his shoulders now if he's in any one of these countries, because he's shorter than the rest of the population, like quite simply. But if he moved abroad to a country where a lot of people don't even realize this, they think that everyone's the same height everywhere, but it's like it varies massively depending on where you go. So like off the top of my head, again, I know that Thailand, that has an average height of 5'5", and if you take this guy who's 5'7", if he moves to one of these countries, he's now 2 inches taller than all of the other male competition there. So he's just put himself in a great spot, I would say. So, if I do say like there's nothing a guy can do, that means that there's nothing, I guess a better way of putting it would be there's nothing simple or obvious that he can do. There is going to be still some things that he can do, but a lot of people would consider these ideas a bit extreme. So this is when you start opening the doors in terms of like surgical procedures, moving abroad completely, like relocating, or just anything sort of like along those lines that's a bit more extreme and people wouldn't usually consider as like viable options.
Yeah, and I know Todd wants to ask about geomaxing, but before that, I just want to clarify, when I was talking about learning a language, it wasn't about moving around the world. It was literally about if you have that skill, it's going to open doors where you live with the opportunity to meet new people that might speak that language, or, similarly learning an instrument so that you have a new musical social circle or something like that. I was definitely not talking about going to the extreme as far as things you can do to put yourself in a position, but you think there are, less extreme things people can do, again, just to kind of what you were saying before, or much earlier in our conversation, which was, work on your strengths, work to your strengths and put yourself in positions to succeed, whatever those strengths are for you.
See, it's a tricky one. It is a tricky one because, like, I'm just trying to picture in my head now, like, if you take a sub-5 guy who, below average height, like unattractive face, like if he did some of the things that you just mentioned there, like, I can't realistically see it making much of a difference for him because, let's say, a sub-5 guy, he learns to play the guitar and he joins a guitar club, like where every Tuesday and Wednesday night they meet up and they like all practice together. And there's a few girls like here as well that he can now interact with. I think still he's still going to be like limited and ruled out like based on his looks. It's not really going to help him because his main factors that are holding him back is still his looks, and learning a new language or learning a new skill isn't really going to change that. And yeah, it puts him like in a new environment, like it opens new doors. But I think that sort of level of advice will only ever apply to like normie tier guys. So if you're a normie and you are looking for a relationship through that route, then I think that would be good advice because, no normies are going to get any high quality matches on online dating, which is what a lot of people, use nowadays. But if he, like niched down into like a certain skill or hobby, and found a new social circle from there, bearing in mind it's a warm approach too, which puts less emphasis on looks, then he could be able to do actually fairly well in that sort of environment. But for a sub-5 guy, like, I think the picture stays the same, that this is where like you are sort of creeping into the territory of some more extreme like measures are going to be needed for him to increase his chances.
Okay. And so, in all of the videos that I've watched, as far as, first kind of assessing that, that's also where your service comes into play. But it's also something that you said that there is potentially flexibility within that sub-5 group, right? Meaning the fact that if somebody has a very high body fat percentage and, that doesn't take care of their grooming, for example, that could put them in a normie level potentially, right? If they were able to handle that, where some guys have already done that. I think they use an example, and I think your debate with Hamza, you had a guy in there who was really physically fit, jacked, and but he was bald and he had an ugly face and short. And so it was one of those things where like he kind of had maxed out, besides maybe getting a hair transplant or, some kind of facial reconstruction. For him, it was potentially a different story than some other person who might reside there currently.
Yeah, I think like you're on the right lines here. So out of all of the things that I've spoken about, like the most flexible one by far is going to be body fat percentage. Like all you have to do is a quick Google search of before and after photos for weight loss, and you'll just be like confronted with hundreds and hundreds of examples of guys who have, like been through a big weight loss journey, and you can just see the night and day difference in terms of attractiveness. Like we're talking, upwards of 3 points here. Like a guy can easily go from like a 3 out of 10 to like a 6 or even a 7, possibly even 8 if he's lucky, after losing weight. And obviously that's more than enough to completely change his life. and I've seen this from both sides as well. Like, it's not just men who experience this. Like, I remember that a woman on TikTok, like, explaining like her before and after for her weight loss, and she said that she wasn't treated as well by members of the public, not just in a dating aspect, but general life too, because of her weight. Like, people would just think that she like would be out of breath just from walking up a flight of stairs or something as simple as that, and they'd almost just look down on her. But then after she lost weight and she became like highly physically attractive, then she started getting a lot more attention. People started putting her on a pedestal. They would go out of their way to treat her with favors and, you know, just make her life easier overall. And this same sort of thing like applies to men. Like, you're just gonna, if you're a guy and you lose a lot of weight, and it brings you up to an attractiveness level where you're no longer a sub 5, you're at least a normie tier or above, then that can, you know, you will be able to notice, like, quite obviously the difference in treatment that you're now getting.
Yeah. So you believe that you know, the concept of a dad bod, which, you know, gets a lot of attention. A lot of women, you know, on social media or whatever will state that's their preference. That's essentially virtue signaling, correct? In your mind's eye, because that's, you know, kind of skinny fat, right? I think it's less
virtue signaling. People have, yeah. Whenever I've thought about this before, I think it's less virtue signaling and more just a cope. So a lot of women, like, I've almost like next to never heard of a woman who's highly attractive, who's at the very top of like the pyramid, an 8+, say that they prefer a dad bod. I've never heard of it before. Like, the only women, if I'm being completely honest, that I've ever heard say that they like a dad bod is women who are like average to below average looking. And I think that they're like, this is complete speculation here. I haven't got any data to back this up, but like, I think the reason they do this is because they know that like the top tier guys who are good looking facially, they have a great body, they're tall, they kind of know that they're out of their reach. So instead, they will say to themselves and say to everyone around them as well that they don't even like those guys. They like the dad bod guys. And it's almost like a little bit pathetic, like, because it sounds like they're, you know, trying to say that they're above the top tier guys, that they're better than them, that they're the ones who are rejecting them, when I think in reality it's the like other way around. But like, as I say, this is complete speculation. I could be right, I could be wrong here, and I'll be interested to hear your opinion on this as well, because I've never actually spoke to anyone about this particular topic or discussed it on my channel before. So yeah.
Well, I can tell you I like mom bods. I mean, I really do. And I don't think it's because I think hot bods are out of my reach, which, you know, maybe subliminally, but maybe it's more of a looks match thing versus that. But I think there's a lot of other factors that go into attraction. And, you know, I know that the majority of this stuff has been all about just looks, you know, but I do believe there is, you know, there are things based on your childhood connections, and, you know, there's psychological reasons why you might be attracted to a certain type, why you might have a type. I think there are pheromones at play. I mean, I think there's just a lot more going on. But I can tell you for a fact, I like mom bods. So,
what about horoscopes? Do you think that?
I mean, yeah, I think it comes down to chemistry. And I think sometimes, you know, whatever is the reason behind the chemistry, you know, maybe it's astrological, maybe it's about common backgrounds, or maybe it's because someone reminds you of someone, you know, from your past that you had a good connection with. I mean, I think there are things like that set people off as far as attraction.
Yeah, I think you are always going to have like an element of subjectivity like at play, and, you know, fair enough, you know, you could be the case and these other women could be the case that they do actually like and have a preference for guys with dad bods, which obviously go against like the conventional means of attraction. But like, I've got a couple points to make. So the first, like, even if you do have this minority of people, like, it is always going to be the minority. You know, it's 90% of women are going to prefer the guy with the muscles, who's, you know, low body fat percentage, in good shape, like, you know, healthy looking. And it always goes back to evolution. Like, in fact, pretty much like everything that I've said so far can be explained, like has like an evolutionary reasoning behind it. So a guy who's physically fit, he's got good muscles, and, you know, he's a low body fat percentage, that shows that he, like, historically would have had the ability to provide food, hunt efficiently, and protect, like, the family as well. So I think that's why women are generally going to be attracted to guys with muscles and in good shape. And of course, yeah, you are always going to get some variation of that. Like, some women are going to prefer the guys with the dad bods, but generally, again, like, you know, it's always going to be in the minority, the like women who do have like these small preferences.
Mm-hmm. So most of your channel has been focused, and I'm sure you've heard this before, you know, on the diagnosis and putting the information out there. And I think that it can be very helpful to people to understand this content. What about solutions? You know, because again, I think what, you know, I would be concerned about is, you know, the people who are, you know, kind of in that, you know, sub-5 category, or, you know, again, maybe even normies who are on dating apps where, you know, that's not going to be very effective. Has that something you've thought about as far as, you know, kind of saying, is there a way to kind of course correct? Because, you know, again, this is something that hasn't been throughout history to this degree. And, you know, again, I know that you've said that in a couple of your videos that you feel like it's going to get worse over time. But is there a chance that, you know, for example, you know, this message gets so widespread that guys in general that are sub-5 or normies just kind of drop out of online dating, and so it leaves a void? Something like that. I know that sounds extreme and maybe unrealistic, but, you know, is there any possible solutions to counter this so, you know, if more guys aren't left out of the dating market?
Yeah, well, I guess in theory, like, you know, if all the guys like collectively agreed like at once that they're not gonna, you know, like put up with it anymore, like they all just, you know, stuck to their guns and had some strength, then in theory, then yes, I think things would start, you know, leveling out a bit more, like, and women wouldn't try to strive like as high for the top tier guys that are like slightly out of their reach. So in theory, like, that's true, but I don't think it could ever really happen in practice, because you're always going to get guys who like undercut other guys. Like, that's the way I like to put it. And it just reminds me of this TikTok that I saw like a few months ago. So this woman, this was insane. Like, she got like 30 million views on this video, and all it was a video of herself cleaning, and she was explaining in the video how like she, like the reason behind it, and how she got someone to film her. So like there was a camera following her around, like filming her clean. And she said that she messaged the guy on Tinder asking to come round, like, to help clean up. And there was some sexual like innuendo like attached to it, because obviously a guy in the right mind isn't going to just turn up to a woman's house and film her for 20 minutes only to go home disappointed. So there was like some sexual innuendo, like the way she phrased it made it seem like the guy had a chance, there was some possibility for some sort of thing to happen there. And just thinking about that, like, even if a woman did send out like that kind of message, you are going to get some guys who, you know that it's a joke, or you are going to get some guys who actually turn up, realize that it's a joke, and then just say, like, this is just a complete waste of time, I'm turning like back and I'm going home, like, thanks for nothing. You are going to get those guys, but all it takes is just one guy to have like the change of mind, who does put up with the stupidity and the ridiculous, and then that completely undermines all of the other guys who have, you know, stuck up for themselves. And it's a similar sort of situation where you know, like this whole idea of simping. Like if one guy, you know, pays for like a woman's like, I don't know, like in a relationship, if the man just like starts paying for all of her food and her bills, if one guy does that, then that sort of, you know, message spreads around, and like women think that they can get that with everyone and that they deserve that now. Like these you know, lucky things to have, like these luxuries, then turn into like privileges, and then they turn into like entitlements. That's kind of like the path that things go. And the reason it happens is because you just have one person who can just undercut everybody else, and then that kind of is set as a new standard that all of the other guys have to lower themselves to in order to stay competitive.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So how do you think this is going to get worse?
Men over time, like dating's getting worse because men over time are becoming less important to society. Like that there isn't really much place for them because they've kind of been like out competed by you know, like just from the way that the like economy is, like the world economy is moving forward in general, that, you know, like anywhere past a couple hundred years ago, men were needed to provide and protect and to like be there and sacrifice. But now that's not really the case. Like most women have jobs nowadays, they can provide for themselves. So men are kind of being, you know, just forced out the market. They don't really have much bargaining power like in today's like modern dating market. And then there's a few other reasons. I'm not going to go through them all, but one of the last one I'll touch on is online dating, which is, you know, quite obviously that's going to make things a lot worse because the guys at the very top, it opens the door for like more options that are now within their reach. And if they're able to capitalize over a greater proportion of the dating market, then that means that the men who are, you know, in the average to below average groups, they're gonna like struggle a lot more. There's gonna be left over like by the end of the top guys having their pick for the bottom guys to select from, if there's anything for that matter.
Okay.
So again, you know, I hate to bring this up again, but it just feels like a kind of a nihilistic outlook, right? And so, and I certainly have a lot of empathy if you find yourself feeling like you're in that category and you're looking at, you know, or you're hearing that kind of statement. How you know, how do you not feel depressed and hopeless about your future and your potential? And is that sort of a good message to be putting out there? Or is there a way, again, like look for positives or solutions that it's not, you know, the black pill is not a black hole?
Yeah, see, that's a good point. And a lot of guys who are in this community have actually taken like a different spin on like the data that we have. Like there's this thing called the white pill, which is like holds as a whole holds very similar principles to the black pill, and they believe in the same things, the same points, and they both use the same data. But these so-called white pillars, their aspect is how can they, you know, use this to their advantage? Like if they know that this is what's going on right now, this is what things are going to look like in the future, how can they like plan ahead and prepare? What can they do right now to you know, optimize their chances? So like I think, and if I'm being honest, like I think there's actually quite a lot of benefit to that, because it's better to, you know, have that sort of outlook rather than living in complete delusion of the situation, and then, you know, finding out that like you've kind of missed your chance because you have either learned too late, or, you know, you never learned at all, and then you were never able to be in a position where you've like got the most out of your life, or, you know, like had the dating life you wanted. So there is that. And if I'm honest, like, yeah, I think that's a good like sort of mindset to have when it comes to approaching dating nowadays.
So how exactly does the white pill differ than the black pill then? As far as, you know, you said use it to your advantage, but if you're a sub-5 guy, how can you use that to your advantage?
Well, this is where some of like the techniques that I mentioned earlier would come into play. So such as moving abroad or any surgical procedures, like this is like the whole basis of like the white pill, that they think, right, so this is what I've got to work with, and this is the situation that I'm in. How can I change this? Like, even if that means going to extremes, like how can I still make something of my life? How can I still find a partner which a lot of guys are going to, prioritize. They think that's going to be an important part of their life. Like they don't want to be sleeping on that issue. So they are willing to go to these extreme lengths in order to achieve like those sort of goals.
So you mentioned, hearing from some of your audience members, some of your viewers. I know not only through comments, but I'm sure you get direct feedback from them. And so I'm curious if they share their personal stories with you, if you find, overwhelmingly you're hearing the same types of stories, and are they telling you that they feel kind of stigmatized and shamed for the situation that they're in?
Yeah, so a lot of people do like provide some sort of background and stories, like whether I'm doing, the regular face rating business, some people like put a small paragraph of like how they found dating like recently, or how things have changed if they're a bit of an older person. And I also hear like some of those stories like through my private consultations as well. Like people talk about their like current dating situation, and I like just do my best to give them like the best helping hand, like provided their situation, like try to point them in like the best direction possible, really, given what they got to work with.
Okay. So how do you think we break stigma with the men who are in this community?
Yeah, so getting to the point of looking at them, more empathetically or kindly versus, like we talked about before, how kind of the mainstream media portrays them.
That's quite difficult, because I think the best place to start with it would be like the mainstream media, but like it's almost as if like their hands are tied, because, and this has just been known for like the media, like ever since it's like was first created, that like sensationalism and drama like sells more than like any just like boring old news. So if they have if you're a media company and you're portraying like this community, the thing that's going to get the most amount of attention, like sell the most newspapers, like have the most people clicking on the headline on a website, is going to be like these dramatized like way of putting things. So like this radical ideology, like these men are violence, they're aggressive, they hate women, like that's going to like always overshadow like the reality. And that doesn't just apply to this community, that applies to pretty much everything. Like you're always going to get this dramatized like perspective from the media, and they're the ones with the power. Like there's no denying that. Like yeah, I have like over 35,000 subscribers, but like there's only so much leverage I actually have. Like if I'm reaching 100,000 views per video, media outlets are reaching millions and millions of people, and they're the ones that are going to have control over, like, well, not control, but they're going to influence what people think the most, because they have the most amount of leverage in like the consumption of like people's content, of what they see online.
So what do you see next for your channel?
Like more recently, I've been thinking about like introducing more solutions-based like content in future, because that has been like requested quite a lot when I've been speaking to people through like my business, or like I see it in the comments as well. So I might like start doing a bit more of that. I think that I will like still be here for quite a long time in terms of like being able to produce content. Like I think about this thing a lot, so I do have like quite a lot of video ideas. Like I've never, apart from like the first month that I started my channel, I've never been in a position where I'm like, oh crap, like what's my next video going to be? Like, what other hot ideas can I think of? So I think, I've got at least another like year, I'd say, of like producing like content on this channel, like of just ideas that I've actually got like lined up as it stands.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Wheat Waffles. We really enjoyed the conversation and appreciate you spending so much time with us today.
Yeah, me too. I've really enjoyed this interview. Thanks so much for having me on.